Saying yes to the new consciousness. Saying yes to the new consciousness may seem like an obvious and redundant thing to do, but in actuality, it is a very important activity that empowers us to make fast and sure progress on the spiritual path. Moreover, it is an activity that bespeaks an already highly developed state of spiritual consciousness. The new consciousness is the consciousness of God union. It is the unwavering realization that God is present in our inner world at all times and regardless of where our body may be. And it is the initiative of saying yes to that presence that activates its power. In other words, it is our yes that releases the presence to do what it does, that is, to bring forth the benign demonstration of God's power. The difficulty is that in order for our yes to activate God's presence in our inner world, we must first be fully convinced that God's Spirit resides therein. This full conviction cannot be faked. In a sense, it must be earned through long hours of quiet contemplation and logical deduction. It is the full fruit of the teaching of Jesus and the New Testament doctrine of messianic redemption. It is not a religious matter, but it is an attained state of spiritual consciousness. It is therefore a requirement, the likes of which there can be no sidestepping. Another curious aspect of this dynamic is the role of our own conscious awareness in activating God's power. Even after we are fully convinced that God's Spirit dwells within us, it may seem strange to us that our own conscious yes acts like a switch to unleash that Spirit's power, but such is the case. It is as if God desired there to be a cosmic cooperation between itself and man, and without participating in this cooperative dance, there will be no power and no demonstration. It is surprising how many sincere spiritual aspirants are in the dark about this particular mechanism. They have come to believe that God's Spirit is present within them, but out of a kind of false humility, they cannot imagine that their own cooperation or conscious yes would play a part in the divine operative. And so the presence lingers and languishes in inactivity. Saying yes, then, to the new consciousness is not just a spiritual discipline or exercise. It is an integral key to becoming a participant in the demonstration of God's power. Therefore, let us examine this yes a little closer. It goes without saying that when we say yes, we are not just mouthing the word or reciting some formulated incantation. How then ought our yes to be? First, we must get still. Saying yes to God is a holy interaction that requires concentration and a meditative approach. We cannot very well say yes to God's activity while simultaneously occupying ourselves with some other project. Such a yes will invariably be insincere and manipulative, and therefore pagan. In other words, the pagans of old believed that certain words or phrases unlocked God's power. Thus they employed formulated verbal incantations strictly for the purpose of getting God to support their own human agenda. This must never be our approach. We must never seek to use God to further our own agenda. Rather, we say yes to God's activity in our inner world for the furtherance of God's kingdom on earth. That is why quiet meditation is called for. We must take the time to make sure our motives are pure. We must be dedicated to the prayer, "Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven." We begin our meditation with the affirmation, "I am here now." This banishes all unconsciousness and helps us to focus on the present moment. But again, we do not merely recite these words, we feel them until we know that we are fully there. Only when we are fully present in the moment will our yes be pure and non-manipulative. We follow this by consciously acknowledging God's presence. We might say the words, "God is here." This is a profound truth that bears constant recollection. It might very well evoke in our minds the teaching of the New Testament, that is, that I have been reconciled to God through Christ, and Jesus' assurance to the apostles that God would send the counselor to them after Jesus was no longer with them in the flesh. This idea that God dwells in us by its Spirit may seem fantastic, but it is the truth. It is also a powerful antidote to unconsciousness. As a matter of fact, consciously knowing that we are in God's presence often clicks us into a kind of superconscious state. That is, a state wherein every thought and emotion that is not of God is immediately exposed and rejected. When this happens to us, our consciousness has not only become present and active, it has also become purified and sanctified. This state of superconsciousness is the realization that since God is present within us and God is holy, the ground whereupon I stand is holy ground. The goal of all spiritual undertaking is reintegration with our own individual soul. For it is impossible to aspire to God union until we have become unified within ourselves. A fractured soul condition must necessarily result in a temporal, misdirected life view. True, we can exist as human beings for 70 or 80 years, but when we die, we will have accomplished nothing of any spiritual eternal worth. We will have done nothing more than waste a precious opportunity, that as represented by human birth. It is our spiritual consciousness that determines our soul condition. The experience of being born as a human being into this present world order is one of embracing Adamic consciousness, at least initially. This means that every one of us, with very few exceptions, will suffer the estrangement from our own soul that leads to disintegration. In a world dominated by Adamic consciousness, this is normal and natural. Modern human culture supports and facilitates soul disintegration. It welcomes us into the fold of the self-estranged and presents us with a very elaborate alternative life view. It downplays the significance and importance of soul reintegration until we finally come to accept the fact that we must live this life locked out of our own soul and make the best of it. The new consciousness is all about redemption. Its emphasis is on union with God, a union so complete that we lose all sense of individual self and merge into the one greater self, which we call God. This is the parabolic teaching behind Jesus' cross and resurrection. Our small temporal self, or ego, must go the way of the cross in order for us to be resurrected as eternal, unified God's Spirit. The Adam mind, sometimes referred to as the sinful mind in Scripture, is the mind of the pre-cross human self. It is this mind that is the source of all soul uncleanness, the soul condition that makes us vulnerable to the lure of prodigality and leads to disintegration. Conversely, redemption is the power or activity of God that cleanses us and neutralizes sin's effects, thereby enabling us to reintegrate and come home. The new consciousness may not be the ultimate evolutionary plateau for mankind, but one thing is certain: it is our next plateau. And before any higher planes can be realized, we must first thoroughly master that which is before us. Progress in the human sphere will take place in leaps and bounds once the new consciousness is fully embraced. Individuals will know greater peace and fulfillment than ever before, and human society as a whole will be markedly transformed. Wars and regional hostilities will end, economic disparities will disappear, and disease will become a thing of the distant past. People will no longer be subjected to psychological conditioning at birth, but will be born free and innocent. Human culture will reflect the values of spiritual truth. The curse of Adam that has dominated this age of men will at long last be lifted.